Hi everyone, Coldam here again with another VOX Immortalis commentary guide. This video is for the heroic difficulty of the Blood Princes in Icecrown Citadel. And this video joins our series a little late because my original recording was messing with my computer. So I had to stop it midway through the fight and therefore I had to start over. Anyway, you can see that my particular role in this fight is the Keleseth tank. And we opt to use a regular tank on him during heroic, whereas normally we would use a Shadow Priest. And this is mostly just because the extra health pool that a real tank provides just gives a much greater buffer when this transition happens and Keleseth becomes empowered. There's also a lot of self cooldowns as a tank that help a lot, so that's really why we do it. The disadvantages, especially as a warrior, are simply that you don't have a lot of ranged attacks. So you'll see me frequently use charge and intervene and intercept to get around the room and get in range of nucleus. Usually once I get a new nucleus target, I'll use a quick rend on it just to get a quick attack and apply a short dot. And that's just to keep the tick from allowing it to separate on another target. Otherwise, I do a lot of drive-by threat attacks. I don't want to stand in melee range of Keleseth when he's empowered, and I have to move a lot just to pick up new nuclei. So instead I'll run by and do a slam, heroic strike, maybe a shockwave, and then keep going about my business picking up nucleus. The other thing is nucleus are not actually affected by AE damage from most abilities. So, like for example, as a warrior, I'll use shockwave for a threat move, and that only will hit Keleseth. It doesn't actually damage the nucleus, so you don't have to worry about that. Thunderclap and those types of things are the same. You'll also see at the bottom right there's a custom power auras buff icon, debuff icon, and this is for the only new ability that you'll find in heroic, which is called Shadow Prison. And this is a stacking debuff that will happen on everyone in the raid, and it stacks every couple seconds while you're moving. So anytime you move around, this is going to stack up very quickly, and every stack will deal 500 damage a tick, shadow damage, as long as that player remains in a movement state. But as soon as you stop moving at all, even for an instant, the damage will stop. And then the buff will start ticking down. It has a 10-second duration, as you can see. So players that are not the Keleseth tank really should try to find positions that can keep them stationary as much as possible to avoid stacking this debuff too high. So to that end, you can kind of see our general raid positions are we have 3 healers sort of in the center. They're forming a triangle that's about 13 yards apart. And that 13-yard distance is because that will keep them out of range of each other for empowered shock vortex when Valinar's empowered. And then the rest of the range DPS are sort of spread in a semicircle to either side, so they're in heal range of at least 2 healers at all times. And this also gives them maximum coverage of the room to handle the kinetic bombs. And then melee, we try to use as few melee as possible. So we only have a rogue and a death knight as melee DPS, and then we have a paladin tank who's tanking both Tal'Daram and Valinar on top of each other. And we found that 2 tanks was ideal, just because you can sort of get away with it. You don't really need the 3rd tank, you're just spreading your heals between Tal'Daram and Valinar. The Keleseth tank actually doesn't take very much damage at all, even during empowered. So most of your heals are going to go on the double tank if you use this setup. At any rate, when empowered shock vortex occurs, you want to make sure your melee have proper positions to run to, so that they don't actually stay near the tank. Because if the tank has to move, he's going to get hit in the back by Tal'Daram and Valinar and take some severe spike damage. So it's better if he can just stay in the same spot and the melee DPS run away. Another big thing, as I mentioned, kinetic bombs. They drop very, very fast in heroic, meaning their vertical speed is increased greatly. And there's I think there's more of them that spawn, though I'm not positive on that. But at any rate, you need as much range DPS as you can to watch for those. And in fact, we have our normally enhancement Shaman spec Elemental just for this fight, because melee DPS is so weak overall, whereas range can stay in pretty much stationary positions and do very well. The last element to the fight that you have to worry about on Heroic is the Empowered Flame that comes from Tal'Daram. On normal, you'd pretty much ignore it for obvious reasons, but on Heroic it deals very, very high amounts of damage if you don't mitigate it at all. So the way we found that was best to deal with it is once Tal'Daram becomes empowered and we know an Empowered Flame is coming, have all the ranged and healers take a few steps back to maximize their distance between themselves and Tal'Daram. That way, if they are targeted with Empowered Flame, they can run as far away as possible. Other than that, the fight's pretty much like normal.